Thank you guys for joining us. This is our webinar, Starting Strong. This is our third webinar in a series of three, all about executive function skills. Today, we will be discussing task initiation strategies in the hopes of igniting action and overcoming avoidance and procrastination. My name is Kimberly Marks. I'm here this evening with my colleagues Kara Orlando and Ella Smoot. We just want to start off and let you know this will be recorded and we will be posting this on our YouTube channel to be made available for those who couldn't join us this evening. We would also like you to please introduce yourself in the chat, where you're coming in from this evening, if you have any children, what their ages are. And then we just always like to start off and let you know to please take care of your needs. If at any point you need to step away or eat dinner or drink water, that's totally fine. You can have your camera off or on, whatever works best for you. All right, so a little bit about us. A little bit about us. We've got a combined experience of 35 years. We are a team of educators and specialists who are dedicated to supporting neurodiverse children and teens through a strengths-based executive function coaching approach. We are all recent graduates of the Executive Function Coaching Academy, and we share a belief that children and teens succeed when they are taught skills in supportive and respectful ways. Together, we help students build the executive function skills they need to feel confident, capable, and successful. Our agenda for the evening is as follows. We've started off with some greetings and we'll provide a bit of background for this webinar series. We'll then go into a brief understanding of executive functions. Then we'll do a task initiation activity. We'll discuss task initiation strategies for the bulk of this webinar. We'll talk about goal setting and changing habits, and then we'll end with taking action. We also always like to provide some free resources for those who attend and show interest in our webinar. And then we'll end with an opportunity for you to provide feedback as well as time for question and answers.
Okay, welcome everyone. Just a quick reminder to mute yourself if you haven't already. This is part of a three-part series of webinars. And I just wanted to kind of give some background around what those first two were that led us here. Our first webinar 2 months ago was about emotional regulation, and we did that as our first one because we believe it's a foundation for all the skills and tools that we're going to learn today. If your child isn't regulated, then it's really hard to implement the strategies that we'll be talking about today. So feel free to take a look at that. Kimberly, you can just hit forward. It gives a little bit more information. It is linked in Kimberly's YouTube. You guys will get access to these slides and all this information after this webinar. And so all these things will be linked for you to access. Our second webinar was about organization, and we reviewed executive functions. We went through types of organization. We gave organization strategies by age group. So again, encourage you to check that out to help with anything that might be coming up in your house with your kids or students. And then moving on to tonight, which is task initiation.
Okay, so before we jump into task initiation, just a quick review of what executive functioning is. So we did review this in our first two webinars, so I'll just kind of go through this quickly. But essentially, executive functioning, there are many definitions out there, but essentially they are the set of cognitive or mental skills that help us manage and attend to tasks, solve our problems, be flexible, regulate our emotions, stay organized, and make thoughtful decisions through school and daily life. Executive functioning skills live in our prefrontal cortex, and that is the part of the brain directly behind the forehead. And there was research published by the Center of the Developing Child at Harvard in 2012. They looked at a lot of factors of development in EF skills, and they found that not only do they continue to develop and strengthen through early adulthood, so truly a very long development process, but they also found that EF skills are really developed through practice, multiple opportunities, through play, and also through supportive relationships or adults that really are guiding children to develop and strengthen these. Some key skills, and we talked a little bit about two of these, emotional regulation and organization, but other skills include planning and prioritization, attention and focus, working memory, managing our time, flexible thinking, self-monitoring, and then, of course, why we're here today, task initiation. So I had mentioned the research that was published in 2012 with through Harvard. So this is just a nice graph that they representing the development of EF skills. So you can see at the bottom there, that's the ages. The line graph is the development of the skills. So really, truly still continuing to develop until the black arrow there, and that is late 20s, so 25 through 29. So everyone is still developing these skills and something to keep in mind as we go through our presentation today. So moving into task initiation. So just kind of defining it quickly, it is the ability to start a task or project promptly without delay, hesitation, or procrastination. And we'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But why is this skill important for students to develop? Well, lots of reasons. So being able to initiate tasks reduces anxiety and stress, especially when there's looming deadlines piling up. So think about school and then moving into the workforce as well. It increases independence with schoolwork, daily responsibilities, and again, looking forward into work. Strengthening follow through and productivity. It improves academic performance and the level of engagement, boosting confidence and strengthening that independence through confidence, kind of that cycle, just allowing kids to really rely on themselves more. And it promotes the development of positive habits and then builds that momentum to keep growing those habits and then build new habits as well. So I talked a little bit about that task initiation is, starting something without procrastination. So when our students or our kids aren't getting started, we immediately think it's motivation, right? It's not them being unmotivated. It's not your child or teen being lazy. It truly is a brain-based issue. So there's a lot of research on this. And first, I'm just going to kind of circle back to the research about EF skills not developing fully until the late 20s. So already, kids and teens have an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. So they're lacking some of those skills. Now, if children and teens also have ADHD, that adds a whole nother layer, or I should say a couple nother layers, that complicates things a little bit more. So one is dopamine is affected. So dopamine is not consistent in people with ADHD, and so it's going to affect that dopamine reward system. So something that feels challenging to start, that's not preferred, that it just kind of isn't super exciting is going to make it even more complicated because they're not getting that dopamine hit that typical neurotypical people may be getting. So that's adding a whole nother layer. And then just looking at the research of kids with ADHD typically are about at a 30% delay, according to research by Dr. Russell Barkley. He's a leading expert in ADHD and EF skills. So his research, through his research, he found that typically, with this 30% delay, you look at maybe a 10-year-old having the intact intelligence and other skills, but those EF skills are delayed at a 30%. So them being more performing more at a 7-year-old age. Looking at it even at a 20-year-old being more having skills of more of a 14-year-old. So really kind of reframing that and understanding that it is truly a brain-based issue in many ways. So, how can you support your child with task initiation knowing these things? Well, the first step, we have a lot of strategies we'll go over, but the very first step is really reframing your thoughts. So, instead of thinking, oh, my child's being lazy, they're being unmotivated, really thinking about this research and acknowledging that it's stemming from a lack of skills. So, being able to reframe that as the skill deficit and not them choosing to just not start a task. So changing lazy to stuck, confused, maybe overwhelmed, embarrassed because they don't know how to start, frustrated, looking at those other kind of underlying reasons. And this approach is just going to really help in many ways. It's going to encourage self-compassion, reduce anxiety or shame, identify those roadblocks that are really getting in the way of them starting, and then allowing you as the parent, as the coach, as the helper to really have that space and ability to utilize, teach, and model these tools and strategies that we're going to review. So just before we jump into the strategies, I want us to do a quick task initiation activity called What Comes First. So the purpose of this is to demonstrate how having a lot of things on your mind, that increased cognitive load, really is going to negatively affect someone's ability to initiate a task. So I want you to just kind of visualize, think about your child starting their homework. Okay, so what are the things that they need to do or the materials they need to gather to get started? Okay, so I came up with a quick list of everything that could be represented. So maybe unpacking their backpack, finding their assignment, preparing their space to work, getting the writing utensils they need, opening their laptop, maybe logging into their platform or reading directions or identifying and locating other materials. Oftentimes, there's videos students have to watch before doing an assignment or reading a reading assignment. So I want you to think of these, and we're going to pop up a poll here in a second. And just from your perspective, what do you feel like should come first? What should be the first step? All right, and then when everyone answers, we can take a look at the results. All right. All right. Actually, this is a little closer than I was thinking. So, Prepare Workspace was the one that got the most votes, which was great. One person did add, or maybe two, it doesn't tell me the number, but log into platform. So, This demonstrates a little bit that there could be some different opinions, right, of what is the first step. So not having that clarity could be that first piece of confusion, right? All right. So some key takeaways just from this quick activity is sometimes overwhelm can set in even before beginning a task. So just looking at the things that you might have to do to get started could just be overwhelming. And when the brain sees too many steps, it will just automatically start delaying, procrastinating. So really keeping that really simple and clear with not a lot of steps. So keeping the choices eliminated, just having one choice, maybe two if there is a need for that, but really keeping those choices very, very small to reduce that cognitive load. Okay, so moving into the kind of the bulk of our presentation, the first strategy I'm going to review is movement. So movement before a task. Brain, or I'm sorry, body before brain. Anytime we can do a little bit of movement before having to think and do a task that requires our brain is going to just really help tremendously starting off. So, what does the research say? So even 1 to 2 minutes of movement is going to make a difference. So research shows it enhances EF skills. So these are all the skills needed to do this task. Specifically, research shows it enhances attention, regulation, flexibility, task management, which includes initiating tasks, and then inhibition or impulse control. It research also shows that there are many academic gains when we can get our body moving and be regulated and ready to learn. There's a better retention of academic material when movement is initiated before a task. And lastly, it promotes neural pathway growth in the prefrontal cortex, where all the EF skills live. So helping those to develop and strengthen. And there's been a few studies. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but a few more recent studies where they looked at different movement activities prior to students doing tasks. I found one for elementary students and one for college age students, and both showed positive results with having movement prior to having to go to class, start a task. Um, so what kind of movement examples are there? So there's four different types of movement, and each one of these is going to work differently for your child. So some may not be helpful. Some may get kids more amped up. Some may even kind of like make them more sleepy and more lethargic. So you really have to find the one that's going to work for your child to help them be regulated. So the first one is heavy work. So the some examples of this would be wall push-ups, carrying books, carrying maybe a laundry basket filled with some things. Anything where you're getting a little bit of a heavy input into your body, that works for some kids and some adults. The next one would be high intensity activities. So that's running, jumping, jumping jacks, shaking the wiggles out for little kids, any kind of high intensity. This should be used with caution because it can, especially for younger children, can really amp them up. So again, it's all about trialing these, really understanding what's going to work best for your child. The third option are coordinated movements. So this is martial arts, sports, any kind of choreographed dance. Um, and then lastly would be more calming. So yoga, stretching, any kind of calming, relaxing type movement activities. So, starting off, you got your body moving, you're ready to work. So, the next strategy is using timed short work sprints. So, a lot of research about pairing a task, especially something more unpreferred, with a time limit. So, what does the research say? Well, it helps to develop better time management skills. And as I pointed out, that is one of the executive functioning skills. So, this strategy is kind of actually supporting multiple areas of executive functioning. Um, it also helps to reduce anxiety. So when children, teens, even adults know that there's a clear end or stopping point and it's not this endless task, and there's a break after, it's going to reduce that anxiety. It enhances focus and decreases fatigue. So, there have been studies that show a 15 to 25% reduction in fatigue and improvement in focus when tasks are paired with a time limit. The attention span of children, really young children, it's about 5 to 10 minutes. Adults, it's roughly about 25 minutes. So, really focusing in on that attention, that really focused attention time and capitalizing on that time is going to increase productivity. And lastly, systemic breaks are shown to be much more helpful than any kind of self-directed breaks or kind of those untimed breaks. So a study done in 2023 showed that one group had timed work sprints with a break, and another group kind of just were able to work as long as they wanted and take breaks as they wanted. And they found that the systemic break group had lower levels of fatigue and distractedness and higher levels of concentration and motivation. So pretty powerful study there. So this is just an example, and it's going to be one of the free resources we're going to provide. It's based on the Pomodoro technique, which is a technique typically adults use. It was developed in the late 1980s as a time management method where it uses 25-minute work sprints and then 5-minute breaks to help increase that productivity. Um, so this free resource we're going to provide for you is the Pomodoro Light technique. It is modified a little bit for kids, so shorter attention spans. And that will be part of the resource guide. So there's a visual to use, directions, and examples of different break and reward options. But essentially, you would choose 5 to 20 minute work sprints depending on your child's age. It's going to provide clear expectations. You'll have a visual timer and cues to help. They'll have the breaks embedded in, and you repeat this process until the end, where they choose a little reward. So, something to look forward to at the end. All right, and bear with me one more, and I'm going to pass it over to Ella after that. But the last strategy I'm going to talk about is just creating consistent routines. And we've actually talked about this quite a bit in our other two webinars, but it's so powerful and such an important tool to use that's going to help with all skills and development in general. And so, what does the research say? So it's reducing that cognitive load, which I've talked about a lot, and anxiety, which I've also talked about a lot. So not having to constantly decide what to do next is just going to help lower that stress level and that fatigue, that mental fatigue. By creating some sort of trigger, so your routine is going to have a step one, and that's going to be your trigger in the environment, some sort of visual cue. It's going to make it easier to help students start tasks and reduce that amount of procrastination. Consistent, predictable schedules allow kids to really move from one task to another on their own. So that's just going to build that independence. and improving automaticity. So when the task is part of a routine, doing it over and over, it becomes habitual, second nature, and more automatic. So it's going to require less conscious effort to initiate over time. And routines just help train the brain to plan, to organize, to prioritize, to use all of those EF skills and practice those. And that's going to just help for managing future, more complex tasks. So, just some quick tips for success when creating visuals, um, or when creating routines. Make it visual, right? So, pictures for younger kids, even older kids sometimes appreciate pictures, but having it written out in some format. Keeping it simple is very important. So just not having too many steps, keeping it, 5, 6 steps max, maybe even 3 for younger students. Just making sure it's simple and not overwhelming just to look at the visual itself. Ensure that the steps are understood. So making sure to review it and asking your child or teen questions about it. Does this make sense to you? Do you understand it? Tell me what you would do here. Just kind of prompting some conversation to ensure they understand. And keeping it novel. So changing it up sometimes. Maybe checking in to see if the order still works. Or maybe it needs to be in a different place or on a different format, moving from paper to digital or to a whiteboard. So this is just one example. It was one of the resources we provided in our last webinar for organization. Just a quick routine schedule that is free to use from Understood. And there are a lot of others in our resource guide as well.
Okay, thanks, Kara. Moving right along. So if Kara was thinking kind of bigger picture, so like work sprints, routines, we're kind of starting to get a little bit more specific in terms of doing work. And this also applies to doing anything that a student or kid doesn't want to do, but we're kind of thinking more around terms of schoolwork. So a strategy that we have is creating a clear starting cue. So a lot of students don't start because they don't know where to begin. Like Kara did at the beginning, there's so much to do when needing to engage in a task that it could be overwhelming. So, a couple suggestions and ideas we have is creating a checklist with numbered steps, highlighting and circling that start point, writing the first step, for example, open Google Docs, or even sit down, prepare your workspace is something that a lot of people thought was important to start with. Keeping the list short for easy success. And then having this all be within a routine. So, like having these cues within routines and the schedule. Kimberly gave an example of a student student seeing not collecting her tips. And so having this cue of see your keypad to check out, collect your tips because everyone needs to collect their tips. And so thinking about working those cues within those routines, that will really help kids just to get started and it just to be something like I set my 60-minute timer for playtime and snack after school and then or break or whatever it is that is age appropriate. And then when the timer goes off, I pull out my assignment book and I circle my first step or my first assignment that I'm going to do. Something like that. Moving right along to reducing decisions. So too many decisions, like I kind of noted before, can stop students from starting. So instead of asking broad questions, what do you have to work on today? When are you going to start? Thinking about more structured choices. So do you want to start now or do you need a 15-minute break or in 15 minutes? Do you want to do math or science first? want to work at your desk or your kitchen table? Even some of those questions I think you can reduce and have the routine. So maybe it's not a choice to work at desk or kitchen table. The routine is to work at your desk. So eliminating all of those questions and maybe just starting with, are you starting with math or science or now or 15 minutes? A resource that we have to make visuals is called Connectability, and it's linked here on the slides. But I just made a little first then, and this is more aimed towards elementary students. I would say that as you get older, having them draw the steps and having them participate in even elementary age, participate in the process of kind of creating visuals for themselves will only increase buy-in. So this connectability resource, it has these graphics that you could create a visual schedule, like Kara was talking about earlier in routines. So something like I mentioned in our first webinar that we went over is supporting emotional regulation. So for a lot of kiddos that we see, homework and schoolwork brings up a lot of big feelings, even just doing something that's a not preferred task. And so we really wanted to focus on validating feelings. And if a child is feeling overwhelmed, being logical with them isn't going to work. So think about, there's a kind of a sequence that we recommend. Validate the feeling, and I added in there, see what your child needs. I have a couple of students who I work with, and I see them right after school, and they get no transition time. And sometimes they need to take 10. And I say, what are those basic needs? Snack, bathroom, water, and maybe like sometimes they put their headphones on and listen to music for 10 minutes before we get started. So validating the feeling, and that is naming it. I see you're feeling overwhelmed. What do you need right now? Let's meet back in 10 and get started. Simplifying the task. So maybe it's just too big. There are too many steps. And so the task is when you come back from your 5-minute break, we'll get out your planner and like start your math or whatever it is that you're getting started with. And then redirect to the first step. So like I just said, when you get back, we'll get out your planner or we'll sit down and get out your planner. Really going back from we'll complete your research paper. That's very overwhelming to some kiddos. And there's so many tasks that need to be done before completing that paper. So really reeling it back to what's the first step. So then just an example of this is, I understand you're mad. Do you need 5 minutes to reset? When you get back, we can start the first math problem together. Something like that. Okay. Last strategy from me is lowering the bar. So sometimes the pressure to do something perfectly stops students from starting. So a couple ways that you can reduce pressure at home is, and really as a coach or as a teacher, is by allowing messy first attempts. So get something down on the paper. I'm not looking for it to be perfect. I'm not even looking for grammar or spelling. Allowing rough drafts. Have incomplete work begin. And then I think the best way to tackle this is just by starting a 2-minute timer and saying, let's just get started and start writing for 2 minutes. And usually once they start, I had a student, he knows his brain really well. He said it straight up to me. He said, well, once I start, it's fine. I just don't want to get started. And so starting a 2-minute timer can really help just start to get the flowing and then keep going. A couple other strategies. A lot of students who struggle to get started, I know writing is a tough subject in terms of that because there are so many steps to the task. I've had kids in the past just start talking to me about their ideas and I might be jotting them down. Voice to text is another great strategy. And then again, just going back to that 2 minute timer, just start to write. Doesn't have to be perfect, not looking for periods or capitals. We'll deal with that later. Um, and that could just get someone going.
Thanks so much, Ella. The next strategy we'll talk about if you're looking for ways to support your child with task initiation is adopting a coaching mindset. And so with our coaching mindsets, we practice motivational interviewing, and that is the use of open-ended questions and reflection to help individuals build self-awareness and make sense of their experiences. So, in order to have an effective coaching mindset, you have to believe in the possibilities of what others are capable of. And in doing that, you have a high emotional intelligence as well as a respect for the one that you're coaching. So, oftentimes, task initiation is um, either kind of you've got it or you don't. And so, the people that don't yet have it need to go through the change process. And the first step is being in denial and not yet recognizing that a problem exists. After that, you would go into the commitment phase where you're deciding to make a change. After that, there are methods where you choose a strategy to support that change. And after the methods, you would modify and adjust those strategies as needed. Last, you would prevent relapse and develop plans to maintain that progress. The key coaching practice is to check in with curiosity, not criticism. The next strategy is about externalizing motivation. So, using environmental supports and tools to make it easier to start and stay engaged in tasks. We'll give a couple of examples of externalized motivation. One that we do quite frequently in our work is body doubling. So that would be when you're working alongside another person to increase focus and accountability. The next would be music or sounds. So using some sort of background noise to improve concentration and energy. Next is the use of color. So, color is quite engaging, and having color coded notes or materials to increase organization and engagement. Having novel pens and papers. So, using interesting writing tools can help make tasks more motivating. And then lastly, gamifying tasks. So making a task fun through creative challenges or points and using rewards to increase motivation. So when motivation isn't coming from the inside, changing the environment can help drive action. Next, we'll discuss setting goals. Goal setting can provide direction and motivation. It helps with a plan and encourages seeking resources. It supports prioritizing your time and boosting confidence and empowerment, which in turn can make starting a task easier. Many of you may already be familiar with a SMART goal. They're oftentimes used in workplaces. And so just define the acronym. So SMART stands for specific, making a goal clear and detailed. Measurable, defining the parts of the goal that you can measure and what assets are measurable. A stands for attainable. And this is when you really want to check yourself. Are these goals actually achievable? R stands for relevant, verifying that your goals are relevant and meaningful to you. And then time-based. So setting up a time-based plan for your goals. So what can you write down to make that SMART goal more specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based? So thinking about, is getting better grades something that can be done? Is this really important in this teenager's life? And how can they make this have a timeline, right? So I want to get better grades doesn't yet have a timeline. So let's see what we came up with. Writing down your goals, and even reporting them to a friend results in the highest success rate. So sending a weekly progress to an accountability partner can really boost the achievement of that goal. This is a study done by Gail Matthews at the Dominican University of California. So thinking about that, having written down a goal and starting off with kind of that original general goal and really brainstorming how can we make that a SMART goal. This is what we came up with. By the end of this semester, so there's our time bound, I will improve my overall course grade from my current average to at least a B or higher. So there's the specific. By studying for at least 45 minutes, 5 days a week, measurable, and completing all assignments on time, and asking my teacher for help or clarification at least once per week when needed. So you can see the stark difference between the original goal of I want better grades and then the SMART goal, much more detailed. And again, just reminding you that you're 42% more likely to achieve your goals when you write them down. Okay, so we'll discuss next the habit loop. So oftentimes when you set goals, you want to change a habit. And habits follow a repeating cycle. There's three components of the habit loop: the cue or the trigger, the routine or the behavior, and the reward. So the cue is that trigger that tells your brain to start the behavior. The routine is the action that you take each time your brain is triggered by the cue. And then the reward is the benefit that reinforces that habit. And there's a golden rule of habit change, which is popularized by Charles Duhigg. And this is how you would go about changing a habit. So you would keep the same cue and the same reward, but change the routine. So you can see same cue, new routine, same reward. And I'm not saying that it's going to be easy to change habits. This takes time and you have to be gentle with yourself. And at times when you're tracking the behavior, it can feel like an attack on yourself or your ego. And so, really having that accountability partner to check in with you and support you through these changes will be very beneficial. So, one example that comes up with our clients quite often is a cue of feeling tired while they're studying. And then they reach over to their phone and they check their social media. And the reward they're getting when they do that is a mental break. So instead of going for the phone and checking social media, when they are again, same cue, feeling tired while studying, they could take a 5 minute stretch break instead. That provides the same reward of a mental break, but it goes back to what Kara was saying about brain, body before brain, and having that just little bit of physical movement can really boost your executive functioning skill capacity. So your brain still receives the same reward, but that routine becomes more productive or healthier. Next, we'll discuss taking action. So the first action step is to make your goals visible. We saw what the research was telling us about that, and the more often you read your goals and post them somewhere you will see regularly, the more likely they are to stay top of mind. One tip is to visualize your success and really imagine what it will feel like when you achieve your goal, and reflecting on your progress as well. So, setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible visible. Ask yourself, how are you going to achieve this goal? What steps do you need to take? When will you take those steps? And what resources or supports can help you succeed? The next action step is to stay accountable. So, tell a friend or family member about your goal. Ask someone to check in on your progress and revise your goal or the steps if something isn't working. And then make sure to celebrate your successes when you reach your goal. Accountability and celebration help reinforce that motivation. Last action step is to get creative with your goals. So, creating vision boards with images and words to represent your goals, journaling about your goals and reflecting on the progress as well as the challenges that you've been running into. And some of the coaches that we know have thought of some really creative ideas like creating a goal punch card. So it's like something that you would get at a coffee shop. After kind of buying 9 coffees, you get the 10th one for free. So it's like going to the gym 9 times in a row, and then the 10th time you get some sort of reward for yourself. Same concept, but putting it into a bingo board and using that to track milestones. So creative tools can help make goal setting more engaging and motivating.
Thanks, Kimberly. So just to wrap things up, we're on the tail end, and then we'll have time for some questions. What we covered, we went over executive functions, we did a task initiation activity. We talked about task initiation strategies. We talked about goal setting and then changing habits and how to take action. So there is a whole folder that is accessible to people of free resources. In this, you'll see Kara created this Pomodoro Light technique. Kimberly created a smart student smart goal setting document, which is great. It also has a habit tracker along with it. And then in addition to that, there are a couple um, flyers, I guess you would call them, of like some things that we went over. So, 5 things to try this week, and then kind of that explanation of what laziness looks like and what might be actually happening to just help continue to wrap your head around that. And then lastly, we have a whole set of digital tools for habit change and goal achievement. So we have apps in here. The Whoop app, Way of Life helps habit tracking, Coach Me habit tracker. Goblin Tools is something that's really awesome as a coach, but also could be really helpful as a parent. It helps to break down tasks and supports organization. Whisper Flow, and then Thrive is a newer app for parents of neurodivergent children, and it helps to support goal setting, habit building, self-reflection, and it helps people create routines and support behavior change. And then I also we were talking before about Lo-Fi Girl, and if no one's heard about Lo-Fi Girl, I'm just pasting it into um the chat. Lo-Fi Girl is just like a YouTube that it's the Pomodoro technique. So you could work alongside this girl and then it prompts you to take a break there's a little timer on it. So another really awesome resource. So to wrap things up, we just wanted to add kind of our qualifications, why you should trust us, and a little bit more information about us. So linked in each of our names is our website for our executive function coaching businesses. Yeah, this is just more information for you to have. We'll link this in the slides, and you can get to know us a little bit better in our email. Last but not least, we would love, love, love if you can take a couple minutes to scan the QR code and share your feedback. This really helps us plan forward for our next webinar, what people are needing more of, what people are needing less of. So if you can take a couple minutes to scan that and complete that right now, and in 2 minutes, it's very short. So in 2 minutes, we'll answer any questions that people have. You can either put a question in the chat or unmute and share your question aloud. So we'll do that in a minute and a half. Okay, go ahead and if you have any questions, add them to the chat. If we don't have any live, there were a couple that we got in an email before this that I will add to it, but I'll give people a second to either unmute and ask their question or add a question to the chat. Okay, we've got one that was asked to us previously. What do I do if we've tried strategies and they still don't work?
I'll take this one. So a few answers here. So first, I guess we kind of demonstrated there are so many different strategies to use out there. And not all of them are going to be a right fit, right, for your child. You probably even hearing them kind of thinking about yourself as we reviewed them, like some like, oh, that would be really helpful for me, and others maybe weren't grabbing your attention as much. So really understanding that there's so many different tools, you don't have to use them all. So really finding the ones that are the right fit. Another thing to remember is that we talked about keeping things novel, right? So maybe if something did work at one point and then isn't working again, maybe it got a little stale, it needs a little refresh, a little adjusting. So keeping that in mind. And then lastly is, sometimes strategies that didn't work in the past may work again when revisited, right? There's so many factors that can affect this. So, maturity level, maybe your child was younger when you tried it, and they're a little bit older and a little bit more available to kind of understand it and buy into it. Or, other factors like environmental factors, emotional state, physical needs, whatever it was that maybe was kind of the barrier or roadblock in the past may not still be the case. So it's worth kind of cycling through and trying old ones that didn't work in the past.
Okay, two more. Am I making things worse by sitting with them or prompting too much? I can take this one. I would say it depends on the age and it depends on your child or your student. I think I have a lot of parents who come to me and say, I just want to be their mom again or their dad again. And like, I don't want to be the homework police anymore. And so I think that those are all things to take into account. But I do think being with them to support them to get started is could be super supportive. Something like I'm going to start a timer for 2 minutes, then a check in with them and see if they're still going. Asking students like what they need or kids what they need. If I start a timer and you get going, can I go get dinner ready while you finish up? Kind of just having that open dialogue. Is it working for me to sit with you and body double while I do some work and you do some work? I think it just totally depends on your child or your student. I wouldn't say that things are being made worse by sitting with them or prompting too much. I just think making sure you're keeping in mind the relationship and what they're wanting and needing. Okay, then last but not least, one more question. Why can my child start things they enjoy but not schoolwork?
I can answer this one. So many times parents bring up to us, well, why can my kid start Minecraft and play Minecraft for hours on end, but they can't come home after school and just finish that one math worksheet that they need to get done for tomorrow. And so going back to what Kara kind of started us off with, the undesired tasks, they feel less rewarding, right? So schoolwork feels less rewarding. Minecraft gives the brain that dopamine. And when a kid is starting something that they enjoy, that dopamine just feels really good. And so schoolwork is much more overwhelming and it requires much more sustained attention. And so, what you might want to do moving forward is really fostering a growth mindset and praising the effort, um, and knowing that learning comes through going through challenging tasks. And the more that a child kind of pushes themselves to complete challenging tasks, the more that they'll grow. And so we just want to focus on adopting that growth mindset.
Thanks, Kimberly. Thank you, everyone, so much for being here. We hope you found something useful within all of this. Just a reminder, if you haven't done the feedback form, that's super helpful for us moving forward. You'll get an email after this with the video recording, our recordings from our previous webinars, all of the folder access to our free resources, and I think that's all. So thanks, guys. Have a good rest of your evening.